We need to discuss some cold start myths, misconceptions, and just get our heads around what we need to do to our car when the engine is cold to prolong its life, and whether that is still important on the modern engine. We've done videos on this channel. There's thousands of videos popping up on YouTube all the time about cold starts, but what is the actual truth? Does it matter? I find that generally there are two schools of thought with drivers. Drivers don't care. They will just get in a car, drive it hard on a cold engine, and just assume that the manufacturers have sorted out all the little quirks and is going to protect the engine. At the other end of the scale, you've got the obsessive driver that waits until the engine completely warms up before driving it or using higher RPM levels. Now, first up, we need to discuss the expansion of metals. When metal is cold, it is smaller. As it warms up, it gets bigger. Why does that matter in an engine? Well, in the engine, you've basically got your pistons sliding up and down the cylinder wall. There are rings around it that help to seal everything off. But the gap between the piston and the piston wall is larger on a colder engine. Does that matter so much now? Well, engine development has gone a long way. We've got hybrid engines now that generally run at a lower operating temperature and have big oscillations between being cool and being warm. So manufacturers are now using aluminium or aluminum blocks and aluminum pistons, and things expand and contract in a very controlled manner. The tolerances of manufacturing are much tighter than they used to be. There is still, though, an element of expansion that needs to take place before we drive an engine hard. And what will happen is we get blow-by. The gases from the combustion process can push past the piston and run into the crankcase, causing excess pressure, causing oil leaks, causing problems with the positive crankcase ventilation system, and also fuel from the engine that isn't combusted because the engine's cold, it's not working as efficiently, will run down into the engine oil and just accumulate in the engine oil. So you've also got oil dilution taking place. That's probably the primary reason why people say you should warm your engine up. Now, it isn't a case of waiting a set number of minutes and then the engine is okay to drive. It's a progressive thing. So when the engine is really cold, we need to be very gentle with the throttle, keeping the RPM low. But as heat starts to build up in the engine, we can start to use more of the RPM range. We can start to drive it harder using full throttle occasionally as it starts to approach the ideal operating temperature. What is the ideal operating temperature? Well, we're talking about oil temperatures, not water temperatures. The water temperature gets up very, very quickly. And that kind of makes sense because the water flow is contained within the engine block during the warm-up phase, and then it is circulated through the radiator to maintain a constant temperature. The oil, however, gives a much better picture as to what is going on inside the engine, and that does take a little while to get up to temperature. Does oil temperature matter that much? Well, the oil has to do a job of lubricating the engine. When the oil is warm, it is less viscous, less sticky, it flows better, it coats better, it's better at protecting the components inside the engine. Modern synthetic oils are very good in this regard. There's very little difference between cold oil and oil at the optimum operating temperature. In some cases, we see multi-grade oils with a very limited operating range because they've been engineered, particularly on hybrid engines. It still makes sense to allow the oil to get up to temperature to provide the protection. Oil circulation is another thing. Drivers will often wait with the engine idling to allow the oil pressure to build up. Now, in reality, oil pressure builds up very, very quickly. Manufacturers have got on top of this. If they left an engine with insufficient oil pressure, you're going to have very poor lubrication, and that is going to cause all sorts of problems. You will notice that oil gets to the head of the engine and starts lubricating within a couple of crank rotations, certainly very, very quickly. And when the engine is off, there is still a coating of oil around the inside of the engine. If you strip down an engine that's been sitting there for 2 or 3 weeks, you'll notice there is still lots of oil around. It's not like the engine is going to be running dry every time we switch it on and start it. The oil circulation myth then is a bit of a myth. It's not something we need to particularly worry about. The engineering that's gone into an engine certainly fixes that. We should sit and let our engine idle till it gets up to operating temperature. That's another thing that I've heard a lot, and people have left comments on this channel. I don't recommend that. If we're in a very cold area, we may need to do that to allow a bit of heat to build up in the cabin, to allow the frost on the windscreen to actually dissipate. And then you've got the dilemma of running the heater, taking heat out of the engine while you're trying to warm the engine up. And in most cases, rather than leave an engine idling, which is a classic way of creating oil dilution, it's better to put a little bit of load on the engine. If we have to just sit in the car for a little bit while things get up to temperature inside the car so it's comfortable to drive and safe to drive, that we can see out, just at 200 or 300 RPM, just a little bit of load will make the engine warm up much more quickly. Idling is not a way of warming up the engine. It's not designed to warm up the engine. When you first start an engine, it's not running on the closed loop. It's not sniffing the oxygen coming out of the engine and trimming the fuel and the air mix as it goes. It's got to fudge things and make a few guesses. You've got to have enough heat in the O2 sensors for them to start working. Initially then, when you first start the engine, it is not running on that system. We should really give it a little bit of time to get up to temperature. And that just really requires usually 30 seconds or so. Within about 30 seconds, that's generally the time it will take to get your seatbelt on and set up your sat nav and choose a radio station or select the perfect driving track. And that's all we need to do to cover that little danger zone when we first start the engine. The best way of warming up an engine is always to just drive it under light load. It may be we live in a situation where we have to go out onto a main road very, very quickly. And if that's the case, we might just want to sit there on the drive with a little bit of load on the throttle just to get some heat into the engine. And then a third to 2/3 throttle, you should be okay and not be damaging the engine too much. How much damage is actually done on a cold engine? Well, it's been measured and it is substantial, but we're just talking about reducing the lifespan of the engine. We might cut 20 or 30,000 miles off an engine. We might have expected it to do 150,000 and it might just do 130 or 120,000 miles because we've been abusing it during a cold engine. Manufacturers have gone a long way to address the problems, and many modern engines will not let you use high throttle when the engine is cold. They will also raise the RPM to allow the engine to warm up more quickly, so we don't have to sit there with our foot on the accelerator. The car and the ECU now does that job for us in many cases. Let me know what the situation is with your car. If we live in a really cold area, and I'm talking much colder than the UK, we may need to use an engine block heater, and that's a great way of getting the engine oil up to temperature to warm the engine up. So when we go out into the really cold conditions, the engine is already operating efficiently, effectively, and we're not going to be causing any excessive wear or tear on the engine long term. If you found this video useful, please boot the like button. Let me know in the comments what you do, what your warm-up routine is when you start your car. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do so, and I've lined up this video and this playlist that you should find really interesting. Thanks for watching. See you in these next videos.